Today I have someone very special with me today. This is David. He's my friend and an amazing software engineer. He has a lot of experience in software engineering. I'm so excited to have him here today with me. Today I wanted to chat with David to learn more about his personal journey to software engineering, tips for breaking in, advice for people who are early in their software engineering careers, and more. But before we dive into all of that, let's get started on introductions. David, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm David. I'm a software engineer at Cruise. I've been at Cruise for 2 years. Prior to Cruise, I was at Georgia Tech, where I studied computer science, and I interned at a couple of places, doing software engineering before landing a full-time job at Cruise. And yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thank you. So, first question, since you're a senior software engineer right now, I wanted to start off this conversation by asking why you chose to be a software engineer over other tech roles.
Sure. I actually didn't really consider other tech roles to begin with. I never really considered being a product manager or product designer. Slightly considered research, like doing a PhD, but I realized I didn't like research because I researched for a couple years in undergrad. And I would say my undergrad was kind of about figuring out what I wanted to do full time, whether I wanted to work I briefly wanted to work in like finance and maybe pursue like a quant sort of role. Then I just wanted to do big tech, software engineering for a while. And then I learned about the startup world, and I realized that working at a startup was probably what I wanted to do, at least sort of a smaller size company. And I can go into reasons like why, but I felt like working somewhere smaller but also large enough where I could have significant impact was probably like the right move for me. So that's a sort of long-winded way of how I ended up here. I had to try out a bunch of things before I landed here. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So, because you mentioned big tech versus startup, can you talk more about that actually?
Yeah, sure. So I interned about 3 times while I was in school. First, I interned at Morgan Stanley, where I kind of just did quant trading kind of stuff, worked on trading engines, and just wanted to see what the Wall Street world was like. Then I interned at Microsoft, where I just wanted to see what big tech was like. And then I interned at a very small like seed stage startup, and I could say I probably had all the experience. I did research in undergrad, so I kind of did sort of 4 things that I potentially wanted to do. And then I saw the pros and cons of each one. I felt like the startup more fit my personality and sort of what I wanted to do full time. I wanted to work somewhere where I had a lot of impact and I could grow a lot faster and I could learn a lot more. And the startup was where I had the largest intersection of both like high impact work, growth, and learning. So in big tech, you're probably not going to have that much growth out of the gate. You're sort of limited by your team and your org, and it's hard to really move up and learn as like you can still do it in a lot of cases, but it's way harder. But I would say the pros of big tech is way better work-life balance than a startup. Startups are not great for work-life balance, and probably better job security and just financial security as well. But you're probably not going to work on the things that you want to work on. You're probably not going to have that much impact out of the gate. You sort of have to be there for quite a few years to start. And like you mentioned, like I'm a senior SWE now, and I probably wouldn't be a senior SWE if I was like at Microsoft or Google just 2 years out. So
Right.
like you sort of have to pick what you want. So I would say one of the downsides of work, sort of what I'm working at, is like it's long hours, it's high stress. It's a lot of risk. You don't know sort of what the future holds, but it's a lot of like fulfilling work, and you sort of feel like you're part of a mission and you have direct impact towards that mission. So I would say like if you're still in college, try out different things, see which best fits what your goals are, and sort of pursue that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I actually have a couple of follow-up questions, but I'm going to ask them one at a time so you don't get overwhelmed from all of them. My very
Yeah.
first one is actually hearing, wow, you have a lot of diverse internship experiences. And I actually wanted to ask because a lot of people who watch these are early in their career. They might still be in college or they might just be starting out full time. But I wanted to first ask from the perspective of a student who's still in college who hasn't had their very first internship experience yet. How would you recommend a student to like get into their very first internship experience? Because a lot of people say they think the very first one is the hardest one to get.
Yeah, I completely agree. The first one is the hardest.
I agree
Uh,
too.
I mean, so one thing I did, I think that helped was I did research at my school, and that I just needed something to put on my resume, like show that I could actually like do something. I would say try to get some experience, either it's at a really small startup or a research lab or just sort of anywhere that will hire you to actually do good work and they can put on your resume and show employers that you could actually like do things, right?
Hmm.
Work on personal sort of projects, hackathons, whether you have like sort of campus clubs where you can work on. We did a couple of those things as well. You're just looking to pack your resume with stuff, actual coding experience, right? Like,
Hmm.
so, and that's what actually gets you like the first round interview or hacker rank or whatever. And
Right.
that's the first part, right? The second part is actually like passing the interview, right? And then that's just like grinding lead code for like hours, like for my first internship. That was my first time really trying to sort of crack the coding interview. So
Hmm.
I kind of just lived on lead code and HackerRank for like a few months until I sort
Hmm.
of got into the rhythm of solving those kinds of problems. And
Right.
then of course you're gonna fail your first few, right? But like you're gonna like understand and then ultimately it just comes down to like pattern matching, I guess. For like the first few, you sort of
Hmm.
know the kinds of problems to expect and you know how to think through them and you know how to solve
Hmm.
them in certain patterns. So yeah, number one is I would say do everything you can to put compelling evidence on your resume that
Hmm.
you can actually, program and write good code. Put the languages that you're familiar with, Python, C++, all pack your resume with those kinds of things. Projects, hackathons. Try to do research if you can. Try to work at any sort of small company that will hire you. And then once you're able to actually get interviews, also if you have any career fairs in your campus, just go to all of them. Go to any sort of company event people come to. Try to go to like conferences. I know there's a few conferences that a lot of companies go to. Try to find those. But trust me, the hardest thing ever is getting your first internship. Like that's just the hardest thing ever. And after that, I sort of kind of automatically got an interview for my next internship. And then my next
Mm.
internship, I didn't have problems getting interviews after that. Because once you've done your first internship, you've sort of proven that you can actually like be a software engineer somewhere.
Hmm.
At least someone's willing to hire you, right? So you can like use that as sort of a ripple effect for getting more interviews. And then after that, it's just like continuing. So I like to say like fall is sort of like interview season. So you have to get into like interview mode. So
Hmm.
you have to sort of start like getting into the rhythm of like, lead code and all that stuff. So I'm not going to go into like how to actually do that. There's tons of videos on YouTube for like, how to solve those kind of problems. But like, yeah, you need to get into that grind sort of in the fall and try to get it as early as possible because if you wait too long towards the spring, all the roles are going to fill up and then you're going to be like, you're going to be in a bad place. So I would say just before the fall semester starts, try to get into interview mode and try to get into that
Hmm.
rhythm. So such that you can just have interviews lined up and just do them and then get it over with and then continue with your life because that's like a really stressful period.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what you say. Like, well, first of all, the first one being very hard to get, and also just going to all the early career fairs that your college hosts and stuff like that. But I really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing because I think recruiting is a very diverse, like, there's just so many aspects that go into it. Everyone has a very different journey to getting their very first one. And I think it really helps to hear how other people got their first one because you could take it in and stuff. So I really appreciate you sharing it.
No, no problem.
Yeah. So my next follow-up question is now from the perspective of a software engineer who has just started full time, I wanted to ask if you could give advice to junior SWEs who also want to pursue this path. And another follow-up question that I have that goes into this category type of question is how much time do you spend writing code? And can you compare it to being a junior SWE to a senior SWE?
Okay. I would say being a senior SWE is you write a lot less code. You write more sort of design docs
Mm-hmm.
and proposals, and you're in more meetings. So I don't know, at Cruise, it's sort of like junior SWE, then SWE, then senior
Mm-hmm.
SWE. Junior SWE, you're expected to be involved in a lot of like hand holding, like solve things by yourself. You haven't proven that you're at the level that you can actually solve problems independently by yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
still have to ask a lot of questions. You still have to like, you're still ramping up. Once you've sort of proven that like you can take a ticket, a Jira ticket, and like fully solve it by yourself. Okay, all right,
Mm-hmm.
you're maybe making a case that you're like an actual SWE now, so you can actually like solve problems independently. For senior SWE, you have to sort of prove that you can lead projects by yourself. You can propose an idea, you can write the design for it, write the roadmap for it, and like execute it fully, like, you know, and lead it by yourself, and even maybe delegate work to sort of
Mm-hmm.
other engineers. You get to like, you could even, you know, be assigned like an intern to help you, or maybe a more junior engineer to help you. You
Mm-hmm.
start to be involved in a lot more sort of mentorship. People will come to you as sort of a domain expert for designs and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's far more sort of high level thinking and design and architecture and strategy than actual like sitting down to write code. So I write far less code right now than I used to, but I would still say it's like 50-50. I do still read a lot of code. I do review code a lot.
Mm-hmm.
More than I used to. I did used to review. I would say when I was a junior SWE, it was just like, all right, David, take this ticket and try to figure it out. If you can't figure it
Mm-hmm.
out, ask the senior SWE and it'll help you. For SWE, it was just like, all right, take this ticket, go figure it out. And now it's just like, all right, you have to figure out. You're the one making the tickets, kind of like
Right.
you're the one. You're the one figuring out what needs to be done. So I would say, yeah, junior SWE, I was writing all code. SWE, I was writing like 80% code. Now it's sort of like 50-50. And I'm also reviewing more code as well. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
writing more docs.
Do you miss writing a lot of code, or do you like it right now?
You know, I really try to write as little code as possible. uh, especially with this like new like GitHub Copilot thing that they let us use. It's basically, are you familiar with it? It's
Yeah,
like
I've heard of it.
so if you're good at like prompting and prompt engineering, you can actually get it to write a lot of code for you, especially like unit
Mm-hmm.
tests and documentation and all this stuff. So like I sort of try my best to like figure out how to automate a lot of like my coding. As these tools get like better, I think it's gonna really like accelerate engineering productivity. I
Right.
think. I think engineers really like sort of problem solving and sort of high level thinking. And there's a lot of grunt work that like people don't really like to do that much. And I think these AI tools will really help to streamline a lot of those things. And I try to use them as much as we can. So anytime like our company approves a new like AI product that we can use, they just approved like this new like meeting tool that just summarizes all your meetings. And
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like every like month there's a new like AI tool that I can accelerate productivity. So yeah, and I keep hearing about these things every day, so I'm totally excited for that, and sort of automating coding and sort of allowing us to sort of come up with things for the AI to code for us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So to follow up on this and expand on it even more, do you have
Mhm.
personal thoughts on how AI is going to change software engineering as a position?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, like I said, I think it's going to accelerate developer productivity. So what that
Mm-hmm.
means, like you probably for let's say you're starting a small startup and you used to need like 3 to 5 engineers, maybe you need like 1 or 2 to
Mm-hmm.
start because each engineer's productivity is going to rapidly just multiply the more these AI tools get integrated into the development process.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like AI tools for code reviews, for code writing, for code search, for knowledge search, for design. As these things, I don't think they're ever going to fully automate software engineering to the point where you don't actually need software engineers anymore. But I think you're going to need like far less than you used to. I wonder if it's going to completely eliminate like junior SWE work, right? Like
Mm.
just, hey, this is, but I wonder if you're going to get to a point where you can actually like write a really descriptive like Jira ticket and give it to the AI and it just makes a PR for you. And like that's I don't think that's that far away. Like I've already seen like small demos of like little fixes like that like you could just tell the AI to do this and it just makes a PR for you. And then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if that happens, it's gonna really like it's gonna really hurt, especially like sort of like entry level jobs. People are just trying to like get sort of junior SWE jobs and try to rise up. And we're already seeing that right now. Like it's really hard to get a new grad SWE job. So just imagine what's gonna happen like, the next like few years when this AI stuff gets really integrated into engineering workflows. So yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. My next question, so moving along, is something I often hear my software engineering friends talk about, and I'm sure you'll have insights on this. When you get stuck on a project or task, when do you know it's time to stop and ask another software engineer for help?
Okay. I would say it really depends on the context. So I know we're sort of largely in a remote sort of working environment right now, so it's probably harder for people to just turn to their neighbor and ask for help. But
Hmm.
when I'm in the office, I'm very like our sort of work culture. We don't sort of discourage people from asking questions. So like I always just turn to the guy next to me and just ask him for help, or people ask me for help all the time when we're in the office. When you're remote, it's sort of way harder to do that. You sort of get stuck on problems a lot more frequently, and it's harder to just like message someone to help you, and they have to stop what they're doing and come help you, and sometimes you have to get on a call. So I would say
Hmm.
when I'm working remotely, I tend to try a lot more to solve the problem by myself for a significant amount of time. And
Hmm.
I would say like I would spend like probably mostly like a full working day try to fix something without any help. If I can't, then I'm gonna like just say in the next stand up that, hey, I'm stuck on this. Can I get some help? And then someone will usually offer to help. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't spend more than like a day on a problem, like yeah, like or until the next stand up on a problem, right? So
Hmm.
I would say that's sort of what stand up's for. If you're blocked, just let us know. Someone's gonna help, or we can reach out to someone else who probably knows the system better than you do. So yeah.
I see. Cool. Next question. So this is following up on what you talked about earlier about projects that you've worked on in these different companies. I'm really curious to hear what's the biggest project you've worked on and its impact on the company.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I work at Cruise, which is this self-driving car company. So I interact more with sort of like AI ML systems, model training pipelines and testing pipelines and those kinds of things. I would say I probably can't go into like that much detail, but I'd say the biggest thing I worked
Hmm.
on is sort of like I worked on a project that rapidly sort of increased the turnaround time for model training
Hmm.
for one of our large scale production behavior models. So it saved the company like I would say about $1 million a year, sort of GPU costs and
Hmm.
it costs. Yeah, and that's sort of like my biggest sort of project or contribution. I don't know. I'm sorry I can't go into like that much detail about it, but like
No, no, that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that was I would say that was the first time like I did like senior SWE work. Like I sort of like had an idea, pitched, like proposed it, right, wrote a design for it, implemented it, and like pushed it to prod. So yeah, that was sort of like my most fulfilling project and also most impactful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So my next question is more towards being a software engineer in a startup space. So I've often heard people talk about how when you work in a startup, you wear multiple hats. How does that apply when you're a software engineer when there's also other types of XFN roles in the company too?
Yeah, so you do wear multiple hats. You're sort of like a SWE and also like sometimes a PM and also
Hmm.
sometimes you're like a recruiter. Sometimes they ask you to like they really encourage you to like refer people in and bring people in. Sometimes you're like a engineering manager. Sometimes you're like a researcher. Sometimes you have to like really like sometimes you have to implement something that's very novel, like no one has done before. So you have to like do a good amount of research. So yeah, and I would say there's a ton of uncertainty in your job description. Like you
Hmm.
could be working on something totally different than what you're hired for. Each week is like a totally like you could plan work for next week and then have nothing done because there's just so much going on. Even like stuff like on call is crazy. You could get paged at like random hours in the day, especially if you're a startup that has just launched a product for like and you're trying to scale as rapidly as you can.
Hmm.
The so like there's a stage in your startup when you haven't actually launched yet, And then
Hmm.
there's the stage where like post launch, you're trying to scale rapidly. And I would say that's the stage where like it's sort of like all there's sort of no rules. You sort of have to do whatever it takes to sort of
Hmm.
go through that. So,
Hmm.
and yeah, so yeah, you do have to wear multiple hats, and it does get really stressful sometimes. But I would say you learn a lot. You learn about what each of those hats like do, right? And you sort of
Hmm.
appreciate each role. You sort of appreciate what a PM does and what an EM does and what an
Hmm.
SWE does and Junior SWE does. So like I would say it's not for everyone though. Like not everyone is comfortable wearing multiple hats and being under large amounts of stress all the time. It's definitely like it's definitely something you don't want. It's definitely a position you don't want to be for a long time in a startup. You want to sort of reach a point where things sort of stabilize and you sort of have
Hmm.
product market fit and you can sort of have specialized roles and people can do their job effectively. But during that inflection point of scaling, I would say, yeah, people have to really like wear multiple hats and do whatever it takes to sort of get to product market fit. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing both the highs and lows. Like it's not for everyone, but it might be for some people as well too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So my next follow-up question is, do you have advice for people who are interested in applying for startups or getting into startups? Like how can they find the right startups they want to be part of, and advice for recruiting into startups? Because I think startups have like more limited space. So I've actually heard a lot of people say it's really, really competitive to get into startups as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say this largely depends on the stage of the startup. So if it's a very small seed stage startup, you kind of have to probably talk to the founders directly. Like
Hmm.
you have to like I just talked to lunch with a friend who's at like a 8-person seed stage startup,
Hmm.
and you with a very small team like that, you have to know sort of get in contact with the founders or someone on the team, and the hiring process is still very, I guess, sort of you have to know someone to get in. Like they don't have a formal hiring process and recruiting process. But I'd say
Hmm.
once the startup gets a little bit more established, it's I would say, yeah, the bigger a startup gets, the easier it is to get in, but it's also still pretty hard to get in because
Right.
they're limited spots. They're
Hmm.
not like they don't have like infinite amounts of money like big tech to like hire
Hmm.
thousands of engineers. So I would say one is just like identifying the startups that you want to actually work at. So
Right.
how do you find these startups? For me, it was I don't know. Are you familiar with like Y Combinator?
I've heard of Y Combinator. Yeah.
Yeah, I started. So the first thing I did, I just started looking at like Y Combinator companies. That's actually how I first learned about Cruise. They went through Y Combinator. Oh, you could look through Y Combinator and other startup accelerators to see what companies are coming out of those. You could sort of read like TechCrunch and see which startups are getting investments. If you're sort of in that startup world, you'll usually hear about sort of new companies coming out.
Hmm.
Sometimes about startups on like Twitter, it's LinkedIn. You sometimes you see job postings for startups there. It's not very easy to find sort of startups. I would say so. Like it's more of a niche thing. You sort of have to like be in that world and
Mm.
follow the startup sort of investment spaces and follow what's going on there. I would say for Cruise, they were at a stage where they had large amounts of investment and they were trying to scale rapidly, and so like
Mm.
they actually like came to our school to recruit people. So it was a lot easier for me to like find out about Cruise and contact someone there. But for smaller stage startups, they just don't have the funding to do that. So you're gonna have to reach out to them and just find a way to either speak to either get in contact with a recruiter there or someone who works there to give you a referral or a founder. But it's a lot more informal than the regular sort of bigger tech recruiting, processes. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that and all of your insights. I actually feel like I learned so much from you as well, software engineering and also working in the startup space. I'd really like to thank you again for your time and just want to follow up with our final question, which is, do you have any final thoughts for students interested in software engineering or software engineers who just started their full-time job, or any last minute thoughts you want to share to everyone?
Sure. I would say, if you're in college, think really hard about what you want to do. So a lot of people go into college without like a job in mind. Like the purpose of college is to get a job, right? You're supposed to get a job after college, but a lot of people go into college without actually thinking about what that end role would look like. So I would say the goal of college is to figure out what that is, and try all the things you can to figure out what you actually want to do when you graduate, because you don't want a situation where you graduate and you're trying to switch careers or switch roles, or it's still possible, but like you really want to figure that out in college and figure out who you want to be and the career you want to pursue. Try lots of things. You're a student, you have freedom, you can do whatever you want, try things, explore, figure out who you are as a person, what your interests are, what your passions are, what your personality is, and what role best fits all of that. So really, you'll utilize your college experience as much as you can.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much, David, for your time today. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and watched the end. Until next time, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, David, again for your time. More links in the comments and video description. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos I make. I'm a Taiwanese American who makes videos about my life and things I learned along the way. I plan on making more tech career advice videos. Check out the ones I've uploaded already. They're all linked in the video description and comments below. Thank you all again for your support. Until next time, bye!